So, good evening everybody and welcome to the meeting of the full council this evening. I am the Mayor of Rugby, Councillor Maggie O'Rourke, and I will be chairing the meeting tonight. This meeting is being web streamed to the public through the council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, if you wish to speak, please use the push button to talk, but stand to let me know that you want to speak. Before we begin the formal agenda, I will ask the Chief Executive to provide details of the evacuation procedure for those present. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everybody. There's no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, please make your way out of the building and down the main staircase, out of the main doors to the Town Hall, and congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it's safe to return to the building.
Are there any apologies, Chief Executive?
Madam Mayor, I have apologies from Councillors Lawrence and Douglas.
Item 2, to approve the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 13th of December 2023. I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 13th of December be approved and adopted. Who will second the motion?
I will second you, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please show. Declarations of interest. Can I remind members that when they declare interest, they must also declare the general nature of that interest? Are there any declarations under non-pecuniary interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Under item 2, the Open Spaces report talks about community allotments. I'm an allotment holder and also an executive member of the association.
Pecuniary interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. Item C, under Section 106, Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Mayor's announcement. The last 2 months have been a particularly sad time for me and for so many of us. And I am going to invite the council leaders to speak in a minute to pay tribute to Brendan, my husband, and to Councillor and to Dr. James Shearer and to Evelyn Dickinson. So before I call, I'd just like to say I would thank you very much for those people that have been so supportive and for those who attended my husband's funeral and for the very generous donations that some of you made to his particular charity. So I thank you for that. So can I call on the council leaders to pay tribute to Brendan first of all, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, my sincere condolences at your loss. As you well know, I didn't know Brendan at all, having never met him on a personal basis. However, this changed when then Councillor O'Rourke was elevated to a role as Madam Mayor, first citizen of Rugby. And Madam Mayor chose Brendan as her consort for the ensuing year. During many visits to the Mayor's Parlour, I, as leader of the council, was invited and of course met with Brendan. I was always met with a firm handshake and engaged in conversations, anything from Guinness to sport. Once again, Madam Mayor, my sincere condolences.
Madam Mayor, my personal sincerest condolences, and also clearly on behalf of all my colleagues and friends. Like many, I attended Brendan's funeral on the 30th of January. I'm sure many here did as well. And I'm sure we were all overwhelmed by the wave of good feeling towards a man of such quiet dignity. And judging by the numbers in and out of the church, so too clearly were most of Rugby shared that opinion. Brendan was somebody that seen positivity where others seen negativity. He was somebody that seen light where somebody would see dark. I think that was a characteristic of Brendan that clearly you held very dear, and those of us that had the opportunity to know him also did. And it's also a characteristic of of everybody, man, woman and child from the fair county of Galway. I am biased, my mother was from Galway, but Brendan was certainly one of the finest examples I ever did meet. But equally, in these circumstances, as the Mayor's consort, I think it's appropriate to draw attention to his fantastic role as your consort. And I think as men, we can learn an awful lot to support our partners. However strong and independent they are, it's important to respect each other's abilities, and Brendan was fantastically capable in that respect, and clearly ably assisted by Kevin. So it's a testament to the man that everyone's positive words are said with such purity. So all I can add further is that I cannot have been the only one that on Friday night did hold a smile and think that God did arrange for Ireland to beat France quite so emphatically. May he rest in peace, and it was a pleasure to know the man.
Thank you. Can I start by echoing the comments to you, Madam Mayor, and our deepest condolences. We start our journeys of life, don't we, sort of going through. We're not quite sure where we're going to end up, who we're going to meet on the way, and how things are going to turn out. And on those journeys, we bump into people, we talk to people, and the rest of it. And I was fortunate to meet Brendan on a number of occasions, and during that time, we had some good laughs. We sat down, and as you and I both know, in the railway club, sat there with a beer, talking, and you being told to stop talking politics, while Brendan and I wanted to talk about motorhoming and where we were going and what we were going to do next. So during that time, you start to get to know people better, and certainly Brendan was a strong character, and when he used to talk about Jerry, you ought to stop off at Westport and go and see this pub, and you'll get some good diddly-dee music in there, and you'll get a good pint of Guinness at the same time. He was a character. He's one of those people that actually, he brought light into your life when you spoke to him, and may he rest in peace, and thank you very much, Brendan.
Councillor Paul, can I call on you to lead the tribute to James Shearer, please?
Madam Mayor, thank you. What can I say about a man that 96% of this chamber gathered here today, here tonight, already knew about this man in this chamber. Once again, I first met James in 2003 when I was first elected as a councillor. And from that day, James made himself known to me, come over and spoke to me personally as a new councillor. Although he was opposition, I became a firm friend. He took major interest in me when I was elevated to portfolio holder for crime and disorder under Councillor Humphrey back in 2006-07, and was always asking what's happening with the police and what was going on. Even more so when I took chair of Equality and Diversity 2012, something like that, and Jim was a member of Equality and Diversity, and that part of his life was a major interest to James. And if I was walking past his place in up by the post office, he'd tap the window, coffee, and dare you not walk past. He would drag you in. He finally ended up as chair of the EQUIP, Warwickshire Racial Equality Partnership, where he stayed until his passing. My condolences to him and his family. And I would just want to say a massive respect to Junaid, who looked after him. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm learning quickly that one of the greatest privileges of being Labour Group leader is that from time to time I get to pay tribute to Labour colleagues. Clearly, in this instance, with sadness for someone passing, but equally I think sometimes it's important to recognise that we're all mortal on this world, and all we can do is try and do our very best. And so therefore, to give honour to the day today for Dr. James Shearer. So on behalf of the whole Labour group, I want to pay tribute to Jim for his 40 years of unbroken service as a Labour councillor for Ben Ward. And during those many years, both he served as mayor in 1988, but particular significance, Jim was the first mayor in the West Midlands, and indeed the second nationally, to come from a black or minority ethnic background. I think it's almost incredulous now to think of that, but Jim was really a pioneer. And as someone who has only been elected for a tiny fraction of that time, I can only say that for someone to have served 40 years is truly remarkable. His list of achievements are clearly very long, but in very short summary, as Councillor Poole, you indicated, many of these are known intimately to everybody here, but his commitment to children and education did shine through. He was chair of the Board of Governors at St Andrew's School for 22 years. His campaigning helped raise millions to support the new further education college, but also contributions towards Myton Hospice, towards the Pakistan Community Centre, and thousands towards building a new mosque. At a county level, James was involved with fundraising for the Cancer Ward at Walsgrave. He was the governor of Warwickshire College and concluded his career in education as Director of Intercultural Education at the County Council. Nationally, he had a distinguished record of service. He was a member of the National Parole Board. He served on the Solicitors Adjudication Panel, and he was on the board of Bernardo's for 9 years. Again, that linked back to doing what's best for young children. He won several awards for his outstanding work on interfaith dialogue and human rights and held honorary degrees from 3 universities. It's therefore no surprise that he was awarded an MBE in 2007 for services to the NHS and to his community. And he then rightfully clearly became an honorary Freeman of Rugby in 2017. Ultimately, I think by learning from the memory of Jim, can we all aim to conduct politics and community activism with that dignity and that integrity. And that more can be achieved by bridging those differences and working collectively. And that the greatest honour of anyone's life is to serve in the interests of others. So thank you, Dr. James Shearer.
Councillor Rudall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jim's one of these characters again that I met, and I'm looking across there, and I can see him stood there as one of the Labour leaders of the group at the time. When I first came across though, Jim was not in this place, but it was out there working in race equality and within the communities and what he was doing, and also part of the intercultural services that he was doing for Warwickshire County Council. And that was my first experience of Jim and how we got to know each other and the works, and he taught me a lot about the different religions and the different communities within rugby and how they worked and how they interacted at the same time. And for that, I'm ever so thankful for, because that is something which stays with you. The other bit about Jim, when he was the group leader, there used to be somebody sat in that position called Gordon Collett, the former councillor Gordon Collett. Yeah. Cat flaps in submarines was one of his expressions and things of this ilk there. And they used to have Gordon and Jim and myself, and we used to have leaders' meetings, and they were quite an interesting meetings, really, between the three of us. But the one thing that was the heart of all those meetings was actually the future of rugby and about the borough and taking away the politics of that. And again, that was a big lesson for me about, you know, if we're talking about the borough and where we want to go and how we want to do things, you need to do that. To that, and ever so thankful for Jim and his family for that. He spent a long time here, he did lots of things, and Councillor Moran's gone through all of those things, and it's only right that we pay tribute tonight to Jim Shearer. Thank you, Jim.
Councillor, can I call on you to pay tribute, to lead the tributes to Evelyn Dickinson, please?
Madam Mayor, with your permission, I didn't know Eve at all, but a close friend of her and colleague, Councillor Robbins, would like to pay tribute, if that's okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing me to pay tribute to Eve Dickinson. I first met Eve Dickinson in 2000, in 1982, at a garden party, and she approached me and said, "Are you standing for council again?" And I said, "Well, I hope so," because I failed to gain a seat the year before. And she said, well, I'm retiring next year. I'd like you to apply for my seat, which I did. Subsequently, I was selected, and here I am still. And that was in 1983. But in all the years that I was on the council, that she was on before the council, she was a very, very hard-working councillor. She sat on housing committee, chaired housing committee, she sat on policy committee, and her greatest interest was in making the borough of Rugby the best it could be, and that was how she used to talk. After she retired from the council, I had a lot of interest with her. We used to go to all sorts of social occasions, and we would talk about politics, but we would talk about life, and we would talk about rugby. And she'd ask me how I was doing, and she'd say, oh, I'm following you, and you're doing this and you're doing that. She was a lovely person. Her main interest in life was politics and this borough, and she absolutely loved, although not from rugby, she loved rugby, and she absolutely adored everything about the political side of life. She was a good speaker, and she was an excellent mayor. And I hope that she will be remembered by others, not just me, because I think I'm the only person in this chamber that actually had any interaction with her. So thank you for allowing me to speak, Madam Mayor, and to pay her tribute.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you. Clearly, in these instances, all I can do is respectfully want to endorse those kind words. You clearly knew the lady in person, so on behalf of the Labour group, it's sad when anyone passes, so we offer our condolences.
Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Quite clearly, I didn't know Eve Dickinson as well as Councillor Robbins, but I did meet her a few times on civic functions, because she was a regular attendee coming out for all the civic functions that used to happen. And quite clearly, what I've learnt from that, and speaking to a few people recently, is actually her passion for the borough and for the town and for the work that this council does. And from what I hear, and you've echoed that tonight in what you've said about how that works through and comes through. So that's really all I can really say about Eve, except, of course, she was in Caldecott Ward, and then Chris Holman came along, and then others came along.
Thank you all for those lovely tributes. It's much appreciated. Could I invite you all now, everyone here today, to join me and stand for a moment's silence in memory of Brendan, James and Evelyn. Questions pursuant to Standing Order 10. Are there any questions, Chief Executive?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Item 6, to receive the reports of Cabinet dated the 8th of January 2024. In submitting the report of Cabinet, if members wish to raise questions or to comment, will they please indicate they wish to do so when I call the item? Councillor Paul, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 1 of the report titled Corporate Peer Challenge?
Madam Mayor, I so move, and I ask your permission to move item 1 into item 2 on Cabinet of the yesterday, 5th of February. Linda.
See, could you just turn, you've got your microphone on, sorry. Sorry. Okay, so I can go on, sorry, what am I doing? That's thrown me slightly. So we're asking to move the action plan. Yes? Yeah, okay. Someone to second you?
I can.
Okay.
Happy to second that, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, I am completely confused now. So you say he needs an item.
In that case, Madam Mayor, I so move.
Still need a seconder though.
Madam Mayor, I second that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now we've got that clear. This item presents the report of the peer challenge team and sets out the steps which the council will take in delivering against the points which the report raises. The report highlights of many positives of which the team identified during the visit, including our passionate and dedicated officers and members, and the good financial position which this council is in. The report also makes 8 key recommendations, all of which are very much in line with the council's existing direction of travel. These recommendations will be addressed via an action plan which will be developed over the coming weeks and published before the 12th of March 2024. The report also notes that the LGA team will undertake a 6-monthly check to consider the progress against the points raised. In moving this report, I'd like to state that the action plan has been fully adhered to and has been printed, which all members should have had a copy of, and I move that report as printed, Madam Mayor.
Any speakers? Oh, there was a lady behind you, sorry. First, then Councillor Roodhouse.
Yeah, just, I presume we're taking corporate peer challenge, action plan and the first 2 together, yeah? Just a couple of points really before my colleague comes in. One is around the action plan and the rest of it. I'd like to see a much stronger link to the Chief Executive and to the leader around taking this forward and delivering it. When you look at the action plan and you look through the columns, there's a lot of stuff for the Deputy Chief Executive and the Chief Officers down here, but I think that should directly link back to the Chief Executive and directly back to the leader, so I can hold you to fully to account for the delivery of what everybody else down here and Deputy Chief Executive has got to deliver. So could I see a much stronger link, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Taking a leaf from what I started saying when we gave those tributes, that I want to be positive. So I'm going to start in that we will work with the action plan in its spirit, but on a clear fundamental point of principle, but a very important point of principle, we will vote against this peer challenge because it's not independent. And I say that without any anger, pure just disappointment, that the opportunity was there at the start of this year, this unique year, hopefully a sign of things to come, where there is not a leading Conservative administration, but the council is in no overall control. So the opportunity existed to have a collaborative effort to review the council's successes and to review the council's weaknesses. But unfortunately, that opportunity was not taken. The mechanism, the protocol of the challenge was set before, any involvement from opposition parties. So that the methodology wasn't neutral. It was led by a Conservative administration that have been in power for many, many years. So that's a regret. But equally, in life, perception and the leadership of these things is incredibly important. Now, Councillor Poole, you said, and then the political peer on the peer group challenge, Councillor Wilcox, both said that you are familiar with each other. You have a history, which is great. That's not to be unexpected. You've both been Conservative councillors for some time, and your friendship and camaraderie is to be expected. But the mechanism by which the LGA identified a lead peer to come into rugby with that prior friendship or relationship is completely unacceptable. And that forms the basis of our complaints against the LGA, which we will pursue, because as a precedent for a council in no overall control, it's absolutely incumbent on the LGA to arrive at a politically balanced and independent peer group, because it can give the opportunity to give a veneer of credibility and independence to a report that is not independent. So we had the privilege to meet with the designated Labour peer selected by the LGA via Teams or Zoom or whatever. Like we all know, these things are quite constrained. Technology didn't work. We had a rather rushed 50 minutes. Despite that council having significant experience, he offered to come to rugby, but his offer was declined. And clearly, my understanding is the same for the Liberal Democrat peer. So to have a team on site after so many years, led by a Conservative peer, is unacceptable because it's not balanced. But it doesn't even give the opportunity to be balanced. And then as those of us that sat in the verbal debriefing can testify, Councillor Wilcox I won't use the adjective, he chose to sit in the Mayor's chair and he gave a political speech, which I think is completely unacceptable. So for that reason, as a point of principle, it wasn't, in our opinion, an independent assessment, but for the good of the borough, we will work with the action plan to make those remedies. Thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to not talk about the whole process. I just wanted to talk about recommendation 4, which was noted the significant funding gap that we have coming up, and the concept of investor save, to actually what we could do, which could be actually a significant and holistic action plan to deal with the funding gap. And I wanted to know how you propose to implement that recommendation, because that's actually a very serious, huge recommendation of how we're going to address the future funding gap. So that was what I wanted to understand.
Councillor Poole, would you like to reply?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, Councillor Moran, I'm not going to say what I said first time, because I got told off for it, but I'm not a great friend of Councillor Wilcox. I first met Councillor Wilcox in June, July at the LGA conference in Bournemouth. That's the first time I met him and spoke to him. And he did visit here. I did ask for training for myself, my deputy leader and cabinet. And when we were at the LGA conference, the peer review was brought up because we hadn't had one since 2013. That is my whole dealings with Councillor Wilcox. So I'd like you to take those comments on board. I'm not a firm friend or a colleague of his. I'm a Conservative, so is he. Councillor Mackenzie, I was just going to call it something else then, but I thought I'd better. I didn't. No. Comments taken on board. I'll work with the Deputy Chief Executive and come back to you.
Councillor Poole, I'm really sorry, but I missed Councillor Mystery. So, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just quickly, as somebody who just got his feet under the table at the scrutiny chair after many years, and I did chair probably going a decade ago, and quite clearly I had done my homework for the interview that I was going to receive. I had no idea who was going to be the people who were going to interview. And behold, it was Councillor Wilcox, and before I could even get my feet under the table, and I think we were more questioned on the line of personality and anything. So clearly I was taken aback, and it surprised me at the time that we should be talking about scrutiny, holding that opposition, the group, the administration to account, and here we are talking about personality. Quite clearly, and I was astounded when he sat there and talked about it, and I echo what the leader has said from the Labour group. Quite clearly, it wasn't a balanced view, and somebody that was doing a check and balances was never asked what I was doing. So really, the report on the part of scrutiny doesn't reflect that. So with that, I will be voting against it.
Councillor Paul. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I thought the interesting part of the report, I think you should always look forward, never look back. And the looking back at the report isn't a practical thing to do. But what we can do, looking forward, is look at one of the recommendations which recommended we strengthen the capacity of the organisation. Because certainly democratic services, Lynn and Claire are doing a fantastic job, as are other members in that department, but they are overstretched. We don't have anyone who's batting for scrutiny, for example. So, yes, let's see what we can do to build the capacity, even if that means secondment from other organisations. But we do need to build the capacity to do the job properly, because we ain't doing it properly at the moment.
I don't think there's anybody else, is there? No. Councillor,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Mistry, don't agree with you whatsoever. That's all I'm going to say. Councillor Sanderson, the comments have been taken on board, and again, I'll work with the Deputy Chief Executive, and it will be looked at, your comments. Thank you.
Moving on to the next item, which relates to Section 106 projects in parks and open spaces. The Equality Impact Assessment was omitted from the original Cabinet report, but has been circulated to all members and published on the Council website. It was originally Councillor Daly that was moving this report, but it will now be Councillor Paul, to move that report. So, support.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I so move. I'll wait for it to be seconded.
Second.
I will second the report and reserve my right to speak, please, Madam Mayor.
Okay, can I call on speakers, please?
Madam Mayor, I've got to address the importance of the missing Equality Impact Assessment off the papers. With regards to the Equality Impact Assessment not being attached to the Cabinet papers, Cabinet and I have considered the assessment, and it does not impact on the decision of Cabinet to recommend the report for approval. I am more than happy to invite all the members in to take part in a public consultation process with specific regard to the large-scale play area refurbishment. Members, I do have all 7 pages of the impact assessment if you want me to read them out tonight. Thank you.
We have, Madam Mayor, we've got an amendment, I believe. Yes, I'd like to move the amendment, please.
Have you got a seconder for the amendment?
Madam Mayor, second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Councillor Paul? No, Sorry, Councillor Daly, I'm getting confused now. Okay.
Thank you. As was explained at Cabinet just over 4 weeks ago, This report brings forward a number of projects using Section 106 funding. It includes improvements to parks and open spaces across the borough, including health and safety improvements at Aston Road play area, a refreshing of the green gym equipment at Corston, improvements to parks within the Hillmorton area, funding for Centenary Park allotments, and there is also additional funding for Bethany Road play area, which is being improved following the developer not installing the equipment to the standard that was expected. The council has an agreement with the developer to put right the issues with that park and will install the correct equipment. There is also money to continue the council's Excellent Park Connector programme, and there is also a £50,000 annual capital budget using again Section 106 money to be able to undertake identified works and small-size replacement projects when issues arise at parks within this borough. Thank you.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We, of course, encourage, are very wholeheartedly behind this proposal. It's great to see the council coming forward, pushing forward Section 106 projects. Our amendment, I hope, could be taken as a friendly amendment. It's entirely innocuous. It's on questioning of the senior officer with regards to contingency provision. We're not aware of any contingency provision specifically. And really, for a programme of works of this nature, the suggestion of an extra 10% from reserves under the direction of the senior officer would hopefully confirm and guarantee the efficient delivery. Anything that's clearly not spent would be returned to reserves. So hopefully, in the spirit of the best interests of the borough, the amendment could be taken forward.
Rob.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My comment is less on the amendment, more on wishing to articulate a concern about process and a concern that it would appear that Cabinet passed this paper without noticing that equality impact assessment was missing. And we have a retrospective explanation that it wouldn't have made any material difference. I'm concerned by that because I'm actually concerned about the standard of equality impact assessments that I'm seeing, not just in this instance, but in previous instances through the Chamber. The equality impact assessments make reference to children with disabilities and gender groups, and says these things will be taken care of through the design principle stage. I don't think that's good enough. And I have been exploring this issue with some of the officers in that department. I would like to ask now the portfolio holder if I can arrange to speak with you about my concerns on this issue, and more widely perhaps with you, Councillor Paul, about equality, diversity and inclusion. And we do have a lot of reserves, and the Labour Party is the Labour councillors are offering this friendly amendment. We could afford to put that extra 10% in, and I would like to see some consideration go into how we can go for gold in the accessibility of our play areas for our residents, and maybe we can start putting some extra cash into that. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Woodhouse, then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of fairly quick comments, really. I would hope our officers are pretty good at budgeting. If they're not, I think they ought to come to audit and standards, and we'll have a word with them around that, wouldn't we, Councillor Mystery, I think. If you're going to put a budget together, you need to put that budget together, and within those budgets there should be contingencies and those particular elements which can be brought through those particular programmes. Section 106, of course, is quite a legal documentation, clearly linked to building and development and particular projects that are coming forward, and is usually linked into those particular things with allocated funding. So I would hope any Section 106 funding is clearly going to say what it says on the tin. If it doesn't, I want the portfolio holder to come back here and tell Council why it wasn't delivered, and also like the portfolio holder to come back if we're going to do any vehemence at all. They need to come back and explain why as well. If you're going to put figures down and we're going to do it for that, there needs to be a couple of car crashes to actually explain why that hasn't happened, and certainly then use the contingency. So we won't be supporting the Labour amendment.
Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think I'm putting my growth and investment portfolio hat on for this one, because obviously Section 106 funding is negotiated at the planning stages. So the first thing I'm going to highlight is that in the report, item E, which is, I think, item 5 up there, there is actually funding set aside from the Section 106 agreements to do what is being proposed here, to ease out any unforeseen circumstances. Regrettably, deeply regrettably, we've had some issues with vandalism recently. That is again covered by insurance policies, so where that kind of issue arises, we'd look to those funds. In terms of the capital strategy and the wider issues, it's all set out within the capital strategy, within, as Councillor Roodhouse has alluded to, the proposals put forward. So whilst I very much appreciate where it's coming from, and I do genuinely think it's coming from the right place, I don't think it's the appropriate use of reserves funding when this is already built into Section 106 agreements. So for that reason, we won't be supporting it this evening.
Any further speakers? Councillor McKenzie.
I just wanted to add, when I saw the amendment, I went and approached the relevant officer and asked, and he said that with the procurement processes to tender for work contracts with the various providers, there is a tolerance stroke contingency built into the specification. So there is already a contingency built in with each project. So that was part of our thinking why we weren't going to go ahead with the amendment.
Any further speakers? Okay, so shall we now move to a vote on the amendments? All those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against, please show. The amendment falls. I would now like to submit for confirmation and adoption of the whole of the report. In moving for the confirmation and adoption of the whole report, this can take place en bloc or upon any member's request. Vote can be taken separately in respect of each individual report. Does any member wish for a vote to be taken in respect of individual reports? No.
Yes, please, Madam Mayor, please.
Okay. Which item, please, Councillor?
With regards to the corporate peer challenge.
So we're going to move to a vote on the corporate peer challenge. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. Okay, that stands. Thank you. Apparently we're going to take a vote on everything now. So, for the rest of the stuff. Right. Where am I now? So here. Okay. So please show. The report. To receive the report of Cabinet dated the 5th of February 2024. In submitting the report of Cabinet, if members wish to raise questions or to make comments, will they please indicate they wish to do so when I call the item. Councillor Withers, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 1 of the report titled Draft Housing Revenue Account, Capital and Revenue Budgets 2024 and Medium Term Financial Plan 2024 to 2028?
I so move, Madam Mayor.
Who will second?
Madam Mayor, I second the motion. Reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Can I call on speakers, please? Would you like to introduce the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sound of silence. Before I do, Madam Mayor, if I could just point colleagues to a typing error in the report at recommendation 3, which quotes paragraph 9.4 for the transformation reserve. This should read as 9.3. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Colleagues, this evening I present the Draft Housing Revenue Account, HRA Capital and Revenue Budget for 24-25, along with the medium-term financial plan for 24-28. However, before I introduce the report, I would like to offer my huge thanks to Chief Officer Michelle Dixon and her teams who have worked tirelessly over the year to deliver quality and efficient services for our clients. May I also offer my thanks to fellow members who attended the rent review workshop in November, which gave us all the opportunity to better understand issues that influence rent increase proposals. From a financial perspective, the report presents a pragmatic and balanced budget for your consideration and approval. And this is set against the backdrop of continued development and improvement of our housing services. Let us not be timid. The proposed maximum 7.7 rent increase is necessary to enable ongoing investment to provide decent, affordable homes, as well as quality, customer-focused housing services for our tenants. Please also be reassured that Rugby is not an outlier authority in terms of proposing the maximum increase applicable. Our housing stock is ageing, and we need to plan for future maintenance and repair. Turning to the report, the main features are the HRA will set a balanced budget, keeping the main reserve at close to 3.8 million. An annual HRA capital programme total of approximately 22.1 million for 24-25. An HRA reserve will total close to 24.5 million at the end of 24-25, and as mentioned, the annual rent increase of 7.7% on all dwellings. The last financial year has been beset with challenges. For example, contract prices continuing to rise, and we have only rents and service charges as a means of covering costs. We must be mindful that the effect of not increasing our rents in line with a set limit can impact negatively on our finances in future years. Cost of living pressures, of course, remain, especially on food and energy prices, which in turn has seen high demand for our advice services. Our housing services continue to develop in line with the social housing regulation regime aimed at achieving best outcomes for customers. Only last autumn, this chamber approved an increase to the team's staffing capacity, enabling it to focus on more of the core housing management function out in the communities that we all serve. And let us not forget Council's approval in December to fund a new programme of stock condition surveys with a rolling annual commitment for 20% of the stock, an evidence base for future investment programmes. Let us consider some of the headlines from the key service areas. The Housing Services team has welcomed new team members with this additional capacity, and they are already making a difference. For example, our Q3 stats show that collection of the rent roll has increased to 95% from 82% in Q1. Last year, Q1 figure was 70%. The support for financially vulnerable households is also being maintained. For example, the development of the UK SPF-funded white goods scheme. This has benefited 104 households within both the social and the private sectors. And ever mindful of the adverse impact on our communities, antisocial behaviour occurring in our housing stock is being challenged. And this will be further assisted with a return to estate walkabouts. Our new IT system went live in November 22. It suffered a number of configuration problems, as we all know, and these have since been resolved. For example, with direct debits and the system not recognising dates. In January, we saw the introduction of Home Swapper, a new digital platform which empowers tenants to exchange homes across the country. And the Control Centre has made the move from Rounds Garden into the Town Hall, coinciding with a transition from analogue to digital and a cloud-based platform to ensure increased service resilience. The Property Repairs Service team has also relocated to the Town Hall, which improves collaboration and the management of the client-contractor relationship between the two teams. Damp and mould remains a key issue, and our officers are working with tenants via a more proactive approach in terms of identifying problems with the new tenancy audits and stock condition surveys likely to further assist. Voids management is a key challenge, as we know, both with the volume and many requiring major works. And in December, members received an update on work in progress to address this priority issue, which is being underpinned by work on our new allocations policy. This will benefit our customers, and it will also generate efficiencies for the council, such as reduced rent losses. Looking at new build and improvements, our successful decarbonisation fund bid for £1.1 million, match funded by the Borough Council, is seeing our partnership with E.ON deliver improved energy efficiency measures, including external wall insulation to 112 properties in Rokeby and Long Lawford. The regeneration of Byatt Place is shaping the future of council housing in Rugby and the Skyline. The delivery of 100 new energy-efficient and low-maintenance social rented homes will be available from January 26. The deconstruction of Rounds Garden is almost complete ahead of the development of further energy-efficient and low-maintenance homes, aimed at complementing our town centre regeneration approach. Our acquisitions in 23-24 have outnumbered the number of properties lost through right to buy. We have a net increase of 24. The portfolio's capital programme demonstrates an ongoing commitment to meeting decent home standards, and we need that revenue to continue this. Our key achievements this year include 145 bathroom refurbishments, 300 kitchen refurbishments, 60 boiler upgrades, 44 adaptations, including level access showers, ramps and stair lifts, and let's not forget, 1 commercial boiler replacement. To conclude, the challenges faced by our tenants and the impact of a rent increase are both acknowledged and appreciated. But we must balance what we charge for rent against the rising costs of service delivery. We are continuing to invest, to improve and grow our stock, which is well beyond increasing rents just to run the service. The draft budget acknowledges these considerations and presents a balanced and fair budget and a medium-term financial plan which allows us to plan for those future challenges. And colleagues, members, that is why this evening I am tabling a proposed rent increase of 7.7% for your approval. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move our amendment.
Second that amendment.
I second it, Madam Mayor, and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I ask if you will be also suggesting a friendly amendment at this point?
Madam Mayor, I would like to present a friendly amendment to the amendment.
Life's never straightforward, is it?
Madam Mayor, I will second the friendly
Good.
amendment and reserve
Okay.
my right to speak.
Okay. Think, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Willis, for your friendly amendment, and Councillor Picker for your friendly amendment. Now, we've been briefed by the Chief Financial Officer on the consequences of reducing the rate increase in the long term, and we're aware of those consequences and have given it great thought and consideration. We're very glad that the Conservatives have offered this friendly amendment and have come round to our view that they recognise the significant challenges faced by our tenants because of an increase at 7.7%. Now, they are very significant challenges, and they were alluded to by Councillor Willis in his excellent oratory. The cost of living crisis is still biting, Madam Mayor. Anybody who goes along to a warm bank will speak to fellow residents of Rugby who are having to make the choice between putting food on the table or heating their homes. And so the effect of a 7.7% overinflation rate rise will definitely have consequences, particularly for the most vulnerable and particularly for the people with the greatest need in our community. So I'm glad that the Conservatives have accepted those challenges that the rise will cause. Now, looking at their friendly amendment in some detail, I'm glad that it makes reference to the various work that is being done and will continue to be done. But I would just point out that regarding the government's Household Support Fund, Stephen Timms MP challenged the Chancellor in the autumn statement and subsequently challenged the Junior Minister only a few days ago in Westminster Hall regarding that. Namely, that the Chancellor and the Junior Minister have not confirmed that the Household Support Fund will continue beyond March of this year, which is only weeks away. So I and my Labour colleagues here on these benches want to be assured that every effort will be taken to make sure that the damaging effects on the most vulnerable and people in greatest need in our community are mitigated to the best ability of the Council and its officers. We also hope that the Council will and the leadership will look at where necessary as it investigates how to mitigate those challenges. We'll look at potentially using some reserve funds if it is needed to mitigate those negative impacts, particularly on people who are not in receipt of universal credit, who therefore will suffer greater hardship potentially. So we'll be holding your feet to the fire on this, and we'll be coming back with respect. We'll be coming back to make sure that we get urgent updates on how the most vulnerable people in our community are protected from the worst effects of an overinflation rate increase. And with that, I would accept and thank you for the friendly amendment.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of points. I'm glad the boys and girls have got together. Friendly amendment from both sides. That's really good. Perhaps that's the future. Who knows? Just coming back to the report that's presented. Let's be under no illusion. This is not local decision making. This is we're being told what to do. You know, paragraph 2.2 is quite clear about that, about the regulator for social housing rent and the rent policy statement, and it has to align with what's going on with service charges and the rest of it. Yes, you can drop down below the 7.7%, but every time you slice that, we take money out of the medium-term financial plan. And, you know, if we want to do Rounds Gardens and Buy Up Place and the other stuff and the refurbishments and the work within that, we have to have the money coming in to actually help us then go forward. So, but the 7.7%, it's not nice. We don't want to be there, but to a large extent. That's what we're being told to do. But next year, when you look at the medium-term financial plan, of course, we've been allowed to drop that. And looking at the medium-term financial plan is quite interesting in relation to rents, rates and taxes. It doesn't change over the medium-term financial plan. It stays at 125. I find that a little bit bemusing, really. Charges for, where are we? Debt management, we don't have any debt management. We're at zero across the medium term. Yeah, I know I'm being looked at now, so I know I'm going to be taken to one side later, probably, and have it explained. But it's just how it comes across to me. But the net interest payments, for instance, never changes. Brackets 11 across the board, across the whole medium-term financial plan. Repairs and maintenance, of course, do go up. Oh, apart from 2025, 26, it's not a massive difference, but 24, 25, we're at 4.779. 25, 26, next financial year, we're at 4.731. So we've gone down. Why is that then? And then in 26, 27, 4.822, we've gone back up. And then, the following year, 4.915. What's that all about then? You know, and again, there's figures drifting up and down, but of course, dwelling rent income is coming in. Non-dwelling rent, which is all the garages and all that stuff, doesn't really change. That means we're not going to do anything with the garage sites again for the medium term. I presume it's just going to stay there and not change. Service charges, of course, go up, and the contributions toward expenditure changes, and also the contribution to reserves. We're putting more money into reserves. Is that right? I don't know. Question to the portfolio holder. Should we actually be trimming that back from reserves and spending more within that? So once you start looking at the medium-term financial plan, for me, there's a lot of questions over it. But I recognise that 7.7 we'll be supporting it. But I think there are some questions around that. I would echo the portfolio holder's comments around void management and the work that the housing team have done and the extra work that's gone in there. That's really welcome. But we need to drive that faster if we can and see what else we can do. And I recognise the work as well when the Chief Officer came to Audit Committee the other evening with Councillor Mystery and myself and the rest of it there. And we heard about the work that come in and how much progress has been made with the IT and the work that's gone on, which is, again, welcome work, and you can see the hard work there. And certainly Echo and plays that on record. So let's be under no illusion. It's not a local decision, but I do have some questions about the medium-term plan and what are we actually planning strategically in relation to where we're going with the housing stock and what we're doing. And are the figures here, the figures, and we can move them around, but actually, does that really need to be looked at? The line-by-line expenditure, for instance, do we need to go into that in a little bit more detail as we lead up to this? Do we need to change the medium-term financial plan to reflect what we want to do in the future? I suspect that would be a yes to that to the same time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think just before I come to the amendment and the amendment to the amendment and wherever we've ended up, I will just declare an interest, as Councillor Slinger brought up, central government. I work for Rugby's Member of Parliament, as most in here will be aware. Sadly, that doesn't give me any insight into what the Chancellor is going to say on the 6th of March. And I'm sure, Councillor Slinger, you will be well aware that no government preempts announcements ahead of the budget statement in terms of financial situations. It is deeply unfortunate, but we are where we are, and to a certain extent, we are waiting to see what the Chancellor says in terms of what funding is available, where we go from there, and what steps this authority should take. In moving the amendment, because I think you have touched on the point that obviously we all know that for some people 7.7% is going to be significant. For others, perhaps not so much, and I think we can all hopefully welcome that universal credit, which of course helps the majority of our residents in our housing stock, has gone up by 10.3, I believe it was, or will go up in April. So I think the support is there, and certainly the friendly amendment was designed to highlight some of the existing work that's ongoing, but you're right, we'll need to carry on looking at what we can do. We always have done, we always will do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor. Just on the report that the portfolio folder put forward, first off, there's a big thank you for the staff who got the boiler at Leslie Souter House sorted out so rapidly. Thank you from the residents, because they offered the residents backup heating systems whilst those works were underway. So that's a big one. And probably a bigger thank you from the council ought to be offered to the asset management team, because how you managed to get a boiler with a 10 to 15 year lifespan to last for 40 years is quite a feat. Perhaps they need to tell our other operatives how they managed to do things like that. But I will take you back to last year when we identified places like Leslie Souter House, Tanzer Court, and Albert Square as being properties we had a great deal of concern about because of the antiquated heating systems that are in them. Now, I'm quite happy to work across benches with perhaps a Labour member, the portfolio holder, and someone from the Liberal Democrats to make sure that we don't get to another crisis with yet another large sheltered housing scheme, which would absolutely blow your budgets completely, whether we ought to work together on those sorts of projects. Because we do have properties that it's getting a bit like Byatt Place and Rose Gardens. They've come to the end of their useful life. They need major refurbishments. The stock survey will be fine, but who's going to deal with the problems in the interim period, I think, is something that we need to look at. I think in terms of the amendment, this is like deja vu. The Liberal Democrats put exactly that forward last year. You're just repeating history. In fact, it shouldn't require an amendment to be put forward. It should be a given. We should do this every year and encourage our independent living coordinators and the residents to get help and advice as soon as they can. The other thing is we have no idea what's going to happen on the 6th of March. There may be a pre-election giveaway. You may remember the rent capping not so long ago. But in terms of the residents now, they do need to get their applications into the Household Support Fund no later than the 31st of March. So if we can ask the housing management team to pull all the stops out and help those tenants get the support where they need it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Before I call on Councillor Watson-Merritt, can I just sort of clarify, I think it has been clarified, but just for clarification, that the Labour group are accepting the friendly amendment? Yes, so they are doing that, okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Slinger, you raised a really important point, and one that I think this side of the chamber are really encouraged to see that this council do at a high level of service. If you look at our housing services team, recently we employed and we agreed to have a new lead officer in common support. And that lead officer's position is mainly around your very point of looking after the most vulnerable in this community. And you were going to hold our feet to the fire on this. So I think, especially when we were invited to the core day where we all had a walkabout, and Michelle and her team, Michelle Dixon, took us through exactly what housing services do offer all those vulnerable tenants at the moment. I think it's a really wonderful service that Rugby, not uniquely, but especially well, we do it really well. So, I just want to take you across with the communication that we have with those tenants experiencing difficulties. Right from the get-go, they get the support they need to ensure they can pay their rent up front before they sign up, and they get the constant support all the way through. So yes, we are aware that those wonderful services are available, and thank you for agreeing to have that lead officer employed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. If I very quickly... Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Watson-Merritt. I would also like to put on record my admiration for the staff, and also having been around and seen the work that they do, I'm impressed. I'm glad that our amendment and then the subsequent friendly amendment has shone a light on the work that we all need to do on all of the benches to make sure that the most vulnerable and the people in the most need as a result of the decisions that central government and we take here are protected as far as we possibly can. And it's a good thing that we're focusing our attention on them, and that our amendment has brought that into focus this evening. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I will be brief. In terms of the comments and questions, I thank you. I think looking at the points you made, Councillor Slinger, I think Councillor Picker has answered that, and I don't think we need to dwell there. Councillor Roodhouse, thank you. I think you've made valid points in terms of looking at the finances from a micro perspective. That is perhaps something we should focus on, and there is an invitation offered to take that forward as convenient. You mentioned the garages, and although work is developing to progress a plan, Woolston particularly, and three of us here, have a number of garages that have sat derelict or similar for a number of years, and we would like to see those move forward. So you can be assured that we are on the case in getting those developed as soon as possible. Councillor Sanderson, thank you. Compliments on behalf of the team accepted and very much appreciated with regard to the work on the boiler, and indeed pointers to other areas. As you know, Tanser Court, there is 150,000 now, although the works that needs to be now rolled out in terms of budget, in terms of upgrading Tanser Court, and again that will happen as we go forward. In terms of household funding and the other issues, I think my colleague, Councillor Watson-Merritt, has touched on those. There are other areas as well. Let us not forget that the additional capacity the team has allows them to be more flexible in addressing the issues that we may see. The stock condition surveys, the tenancy audits will act, we hope, as an early warning system for those tenants who are not able to meet those rents, as indeed, as I think I did mention in the introduction, the estate walkabouts. This is around getting the team back out there earlier so they can see the problems and act on those problems. So actually, it's around being proactive rather than reactive. If I've missed anyone, I apologise. You have the email. Please do feel to get in touch. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. We will now move forward and we will vote on the Conservatives' friendly amendment to the Labour amendment. So all of those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous right across, so that's carried. So, Councillor Picker, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 3 of the report titled Approval of Community Infrastructure Levy Charging Schedule?
Madam Mayor, I so move.
Who will second it?
Madam Mayor, I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Can you please introduce them?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and it's a great pleasure to move this report. But before I do so, could I add my condolences to you and your family and to the friends and family of Dr. Jim Shearer and Eve Dickinson. Before I come to the full report, I do just want to note a few notes of thanks. The first one is to our Development Strategy Manager, Neil Holley, and his team, who have worked through the options for the Community Infrastructure Levy and given us as a council clear options and guidance on how we have come to this point. I also want to thank my colleagues around the Chamber on Planning Services Working Party, who have discussed this item at length and, I believe, improved the item. And finally, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the work of my immediate predecessor in this role, Councillor Simpson-Vince, who is now back on these benches where she belongs. So, in implementing SIL, it should be seen as an important part of our wider development strategy and the other projects that we're bringing forward, including the local plan review. The community infrastructure levy will enable us to raise additional funding from developers, which we can use more flexibly than Section 106 to deliver infrastructure and other projects throughout the whole of the Borough of Rugby. If we approve it tonight, it will apply to eligible approved applications from the 1st of April 2024. The proposed charging schedule has been through a number of rounds of consultation, and it was submitted to the examiner last year. And I'm very pleased to say that the examiner's report, which I'm sure everyone has read, finds that our charging schedule is sound and provides an appropriate basis for the collection of the community infrastructure levy and wouldn't threaten delivery of the local plan or affordable housing. So the recommendation is that we adopt the charging schedule and from the 1st of April begin to collect this funding. And before I conclude, Madam Mayor, I do just want to briefly touch on the next steps. So as per paragraph 3.5 of the report, a future report will come to Cabinet and then Council, setting out our proposals for the spending of SIL. This will be considered by Planning Services Working Party before it comes to Cabinet and Council, and I look forward to having those conversations about how we can use this for the betterment of all our residents. So I hope that everyone will be supporting this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moran. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I also extend my sincere condolences to you on the loss of your husband? Thank you. Madam Mayor, together with both the viability appraisal and independent examination of the proposed SIL charging schedule, overall we see that this will not threaten the delivery of the current local plan, which we know is vitally important to limit any possibility of speculative development through lack of delivery. Communities across the borough will benefit from SIL and will give considerable encouragement to rural communities to continue to develop neighbourhood plans. In that regard, the borough has moved in a positive direction since the days of the little-used parish plans. The Planning Services Working Party members have had positive discussion on the implementation of SIL and certainly conclude and recommend that Council should also support the recommendation as presented to us tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and happy to echo everything Councillor Gillias has just said. I love talking about SIL in this chamber, and it's great. I love and echo everything you've said, Councillor Picker, and I do hope that's the last time I ever quite need to say that quite so fully. But you told the story fantastically. SIL, for a local authority, SILs are fantastic. As someone who's worked in the development industry for over 20 years, SIL is a constant on every spreadsheet I've ever had to work with. Again, to echo Councillor Gillias, SIL monies can bring much needed investment into local communities. And again, I'm going to be very conscious and say these words very carefully, but a certain David Cameron was leader of the government when this was brought in. It was one of, clearly David Cameron is perhaps one of the various 5 tribes that may or may not be party to who collectively you all support opposite. But one good thing that David Cameron did with the coalition government was to bring in a community infrastructure levy provision. Now, unless we've jumped into a time machine, that was back in 2010. I was bizarrely party to a consultation at that process, and the whole SIL infrastructure then, levy, was talked about to bring much needed investment into an economy on its knees coming out of the credit crunch. The idea was get the legislation in, and as the economy, as the property development industry picks up, developers will have to embrace it, because ultimately it's a tax. It's a development tax. It's only a couple of percent. It's a development tax. Now, as we're aware, rugby has seen a huge amount of development over those last years since 2010. A huge amount. I believe the highest levels of development in the West Midlands for house building and for warehousing. So one question I've got to ask you, Councillor Pick, and it's fantastic. I know Councillor Jill Simpson-Vince from another era. It's great that in this instance she's able to be here to be party to this debate. Because I want to know why. Why now? Because the economy is not in the healthiest state. One of your 5 tribes, the Liz Trust, sorted that. So we're in a difficult position. We're in a difficult position. But also, there's not much left of rugby still to be built on. And you know, Councillor Picker, that when we're in our planning services working group, some of us will argue quite strongly that there shouldn't be any more warehouse development. We've got as far as we can. So this is the very definition of bringing something in after closing the door of the stable after the horse has bolted. Because there isn't much land to be developed on. So you're bringing it in, great. How much will it raise? What will it raise relative to what it could have raised since 2010? So I know other colleagues wish to speak, but my only question, please, is to give us an answer, a clear answer. Why now? And what's changed now since 2010? And finally, just in that spirit of collaboration, Councillor Picker, I do feel I'm slightly indignant of you shelling out praise with regards to SIL for Rugby Brough Council, but I was quite clear in giving my voice to that last year, both to introduce the idea, but also, perhaps it was a mistake, it was a typo, but in the policies put forward originally by this Conservative administration, you seem to have omitted warehousing development. And it was only with the suggestions of the Liberal Democrats, I believe, and Labour, that it seemed to be an omission of not including provision of SIL on warehousing, that item was hastily withdrawn from the agenda last year, and it then came back miraculously the following meeting with warehousing. So I'll shut up now, but please do tell us, when you do come back, why now are you bringing in SIL, and what's changed relative to the last decade? Thank you.
Councillor Simpson-Vince, and welcome.
Okay,
sorry,
everyone gets it wrong.
a long night.
I can give you a bit of an answer to that, Councillor Morant, and thank you for making us both sound quite old by saying we're from another era. I have been a big fan of SIL for a long time, and it was always a question that I asked, can we have SIL, can we get SIL introduced? And when we had our new chief officer arrive in, I think it was November 21, it was one of the first conversations I had with her, can we please have SIL? And she said yes. And so that started this journey to get to the point we are today. I thank Councillor Picker for giving me credit, but I really didn't do much apart from that initial conversation. So I'd like to thank the portfolio holder and the chief officer and her team for actually getting us to this point. I think we should have been here before, but we are where we are, and we've got this now. So I think it's good news for us, it's good news for the parishes, and it works. You know, Section 106 is a bit cumbersome if you're doing 100 houses. It's a massive document. It slows everything down. This is definitely the way forward. So Councillor Picker might have a different reason, but that's the reason I would give as to why now. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I think we'll be supporting the report today, but we will still be arguing quite robustly that SIL has to be reasonably redistributed to the areas that don't have neighbourhood plans, like the urban area. Neil Holly said that there may be ways in which this may be able to be achieved. But and hopefully that will appear in the second report that you will have at a later date, because it doesn't do, at the moment, it doesn't do anything for the urban areas in terms of upgraded infrastructure, social housing, BNG, for example, it's not doing much for us in that direction because we are not a parish or a neighbourhood plan area, which is very difficult within the inner urban wards. So, yeah, yes, we'll go with this tonight, but we will be chasing Planning Services Working Party to ensure that there is support for local communities within the urban area.
Councillor Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now, as councillors, when we talk to our residents, I think it's fair to say that many of our residents would tell us that there has been insufficient spending on infrastructure all across the borough, in the town, in the villages, in the rural areas. Now, I've been taking my colleague Councillor Moran's challenge. I've been scratching my head too as to what the possible reason could be for not levying a development tax, a SIL, a Conservative policy, for all of those years. Now, could Councillor Picker have a think? What is there a major political event of some kind that perhaps has to happen by the 28th of January of next year, or certainly in the second half of this year? Can he think of anything possibly that may be about to happen? I can't, but I'd be very grateful for his help answering that. Thank you.
Sorry, just a quick one from me, Madam Mayor. In our rapidly changing world, rural areas often face unique challenges, including limited resources and infrastructure development. The introduction of SIL will offer flexibility and funding for essential infrastructure projects in rural areas. Communities that draw up neighbourhood plans will see their share of their planning levy increase from 15% to 25% on new developments in their neighbourhood plan area. SIL will be a powerful tool for driving positive change in our rural communities. By investing in essential infrastructure, fostering community engagement and promoting sustainability, the levy paves the way for a brighter and more prosperous future for all. I welcome and support the implementation of SIL to unlock the full potential of our rural communities. Thank you.
Councillor Picker to take up his right of reply. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Councillor Slinger, I'm going to come to you first. So, as I think we've sort of covered, this process began a couple of years ago. It's gone through several rounds of iteration. In terms of the timing, obviously we're bringing it to the first available council meeting after we've had the report back from the inspector. I think if you believe that I have timed this for any other reason, you credit me with a degree of precognition that I sadly do not possess. But, you know, sometimes the timing works out, sometimes it doesn't. On timings, Councillor Moran, I'm glad you brought up the comment about a time machine, because I had a joke about the only TARDIS I've got at home being a coffee mug. In terms of why we're bringing SIL forward, I think Councillor Timpson-Vince covered some of that. You asked how much money it will raise. If you go to the report, there's a bit marked financial implications, and it says that evidence prepared for the examination of the SIL charging schedule estimates SIL receipts in the period to 2031 of £8,286,300. That doesn't include receipts from convenience retail or industrial and warehousing developments, as there is not a clear basis for estimating the amount of that development likely to come forward. So that gives you an idea of the financial implications. You also talked about housing and housing development, and obviously a lot of the housing development that's taken place in Rugby over recent years has been through the Halton Sustainable Urban Extension, which, as per the report, isn't covered by SIL because it's a sustainable urban extension. So I think with some of that perhaps gives you an indication of why we didn't take it forward as soon as the government brought it forward. As I believe I've previously said, I wasn't here at that time, so I do not know the precise details of why we didn't move forward at that particular time. However, there is an opportunity to bring it forward. I have done so. I'm glad to have your support in doing that. You also touched on the warehousing. if memory serves, the initial report from BNP Paribas didn't recommend charging an industrial route. When that was brought to my attention, I did ask the development manager to go and ask whether this could be looked at again. It was. Here we are. You'll note that I made reference to thinking the Planning Services Working Party and the work that that's done did give the opportunity to improve the initial proposals. Councillor Sanderson, as I said, we will look very carefully at what we can spend this money on. We will have those talks in Planning Services Working Party, and I hope that another cross-party recommendation can come forward that we can all sign up for on how we use this funding to better the residents. And finally, thank you to my colleagues, Councillor Gillies and Councillor Maudis, for highlighting some of the ways that this funding will improve it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Just a point of order, please.
Sorry. Councillor Moran, can you just clarify why you're coming in, please?
The question Councillor Picker quoted was incorrect. It was how much relative to how much could have been raised by SIL not going forward. That was all.
Moving forward, Councillor Ms Robbins, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 4 of the report titled Finance and Performance Monitoring 2023-24, quarter 3?
I will, Madam Mayor, but my laptop has just died on me, so I'll have to wing it, as they say. Yes, Madam Mayor, I move the report.
Okay. Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, I'll second the motion and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Would you like to introduce the report? Or?
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is the item from yesterday's Cabinet meeting, which is moved to Council, which is to do with the... I've forgotten the word. Yeah, it's not. It's quarter 3, yes, but the... Oh. Move it up a bit. This is what happens when you get old, Madam Mayor. I'm awfully sorry, but old lady like me...
It happens to young people as well.
You forget, and my... Yeah, well, it's the violence. That's the word I was looking for. I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. The violence, which amount to £900,000. Thank you.
Could you please put... Oh, you put off. Any speakers, please? Would you like to take your right of reply? On. Councillor Wills, will you move the confirmation and adoption of item 5 of the report titled Asylum Seeker Support from Warwickshire County Council?
I so move, Madam Mayor.
Who will second it?
I ask your permission for one of my colleagues to go to the toilet.
Okay.
Which is... That's the problem.
No? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is hopefully a simple report and will be welcomed by the Chamber. The report sets out the proposal to share with the County Council an allocation of £192,750 unring-fenced funding received by the Borough Council from the Home Office during 23-24 in respect of asylum seekers living in contingency accommodation in Rugby. The funding was granted in recognition of the impact of local services due to providing support. During 23-24, as I mentioned, this funding was received. It was a one-off, allocated on the base of £750 per asylum seeker. It was paid directly to the Borough Council, whose role has been to lead and coordinate a multi-agency response. However, the County Council has also provided significant support via youth and targeted support team migration support project. For example, employed workers to work within hotels to provide advice and support, directly commissioned support from Coventry Refugee and Migrant Centre to support caseworker arrangements, and also been working with local charities. In terms of the recommendation, supplementary general fund revenue of 50% of the amount, £96,375, be established to enable transfer of funding to the County Council, with remaining funding be held as a reserve to support. This is also expanded on through the other recommendations, and with that in mind, Madam Mayor, I move the report as written. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody else speaking? Okay, right. So, I would now like to submit for confirmation and adoption of the whole of report. In moving for the confirmation and adoption of the whole report, this can take place en bloc or upon any member's request. A vote can be taken separately in respect of each report. Does any member wish for a vote to be taken in respect of an individual report? Okay, so we'll move to the vote. Yes? All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's carried. And I'm going to move now, if everybody's okay, if everybody's in support of it, for a short 5-minute break. Okay? Yeah, is everybody okay with that? Yes, thank you. we're starting again. Right, moving on to the next business.
You just need to...
I know, don't worry. Live stream. Okay, thank you everybody. Right, to receive the report of the officers, the next item is to receive the report of the Chief Executive set out at item 7A of the agenda. The report concerns urgent decisions taken under delegated powers. Councillor Willis, will you move the report? Who second? Sorry.
I'll move the motion, Madam Mayor.
I'll second the motion,
Are there
Madam
any?
Mayor.
Sorry, behave now. I'm getting confused. Are there any speakers, or does anybody want to move the report, or are we going? Okay. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'll move the report as printed.
You show. That's carried. Thank you. Right, where are we now? Right, the next item is to receive a report of the returning officer set out item 7B of the agenda. The report concerns the results of the by-election in Dunsmore Ward held on the 14th of December 2023.
Madam Mayor, the report of the returning officer gives details of the vote cast for each candidate in the Dunsmore Ward and indicates the candidates elected who have made a declaration of acceptance of office.
I would like to extend a warm welcome to Councillor Bennett and welcome back to the Council, Councillor Mrs Simpson-Vince. I hope you find your time at the Council rewarding. On behalf of the Council, I'd like to place on record its appreciation of the contribution which retiring councillors Howard and Depot Roberts made during their service as members of the Borough Council. Notice of motion. In accordance with the Council's constitution, there are no notice of motions on notice for consideration. Item 9, motion to exclude the public under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. To consider the following resolution. Under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of information defined in paragraph 1 and 3 of Schedule 12A and the Act. I so move. Who will second it?
I will second the motion, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour, please show. That concludes the meeting, the public part of the meeting. Can we take the live stream off, please?